With all the benefits that come with DeFi, it's also important to consider the drawbacks. We'll have slightly different categories than we had in the benefits lesson though. Here we'll look at tech drawbacks, user experience drawbacks, and regulatory drawbacks. There is a lot of overlap among these, but it should still be pretty easily digestible. One of the first benefits I mentioned was the immutable nature of blockchains, and I briefly mentioned how this could also be a drawback, but let's look a bit closer. Because blockchains keep an eternal record, it is key that we pay close attention to how we treat our transactions and addresses. We'll dive deeper into this during our privacy and security lessons, but here are a couple good rules to consider. 1. Don't reuse addresses. And 2. Separate your personal identity from your wallet addresses as much as possible. I know this can be a scary thing, and it's hard to know what your vulnerabilities are, which is why we'll delve deeper into understanding them later in the course. Now, blockchains are also immutable, which means once a transaction is added to the chain, there's no going back. This means if you send funds to someone who happens to be a scammer, there's very little chance you'll ever get your money back. In legacy finance, you could do a chargeback, or you could tell your bank it was fraudulent, which could help you recover it, but that's not really an option here. The other tech drawbacks are partially due to how young DeFi is. There are still regular hacks, scams, exploits, and rug pulls that happen. Generally speaking, once a smart contract is broadcast to the blockchain, it can't be changed. So if there are any bugs in it, they will likely be exploited at some point. This is why it's so important to know what you're getting into when you use a DeFi protocol, why it's so important for them to be audited, and it's why we'll cover how to analyze the risks of a given DeFi protocol later in the course. Now, I can't mention tech drawbacks without mentioning the elephant in the room, Ethereum gas fees. Because most of DeFi is built on Ethereum, the cost to use Ethereum is so high that many people are priced out of using DeFi. There are ways around this. We could use layer 2 protocols like Polygon or XDAI, or competing platforms like Binance Smart Chain or Solana or Cardano, but none of these have the infrastructure that Ethereum does. The gas issue will be present until Ethereum 2 goes live with proof of stake and sharding, so again, we'll use the testnet. I also recommend using a testnet anytime you're trying a new protocol, so that you don't have to worry about losing funds. As I said in the benefits lesson, the UX drawbacks largely center around the high learning curve. This both relates to having to get a Web3 wallet, learn how fees work, which protocols are the most safe and secure, how to manage your personal privacy and security, but it's also how to avoid scams and work through the enormous amount of noise to find actual useful information. One UX drawback that I didn't mention earlier is that you now have to keep your own records for reporting. I can't give you any kind of compliance or tax advice, of course, but we will cover sites that will help you analyze your address and make the process easier. It's key that you learn how to track your transactions, and especially your DeFi transactions, early on, or else you will have a giant mess to deal with later. Beyond that, things like signing every transaction with a hardware wallet and using secure two-factor authentication are small inconveniences that we deal with, but in my opinion, they are well worth the peace of mind and security that come with them. Regulatory drawbacks are a bit tricky to talk about because they're different depending on where you live. Obviously, I understand US laws far more than I understand any other country's laws, but in most places, there is still a lot of regulatory uncertainty about how to classify different assets. DeFi is creating totally new financial primitives that most regulators are far from understanding. This often leads to poorly thought out laws being passed or getting shoved into infrastructure bills, or countries banning cryptocurrencies outright. Obviously, this drawback isn't limited to DeFi, it's for the industry as a whole, which is why it's so important to consider. Now, we can only hope that this will improve over time, but as I said in the lesson, What is DeFi? When a decentralized organization is attacked, the response is to become more decentralized. So we'll likely see a future where projects are either fully decentralized or fully compliant, with very little in between. Now that we've got an understanding of all the benefits and drawbacks of DeFi, let's look at how DeFi got to where it is now.